All right, everyone, welcome to this awesome topic. It's actually was prefaced by Kunal a few weeks ago. Kunal, I'm gonna steal a little bit of your thunder, a little bit. All right, you built this app that analyzes security exposure for everyone's Lovable app because obviously you and your anti-love for Lovable, but you know how the common or like I guess what you want to say is if people are using Lovable, there are a lot. Most of the people are beginners. People are just getting into it. Everyone's pretending to learn how to code or code. Gets everyone gets excited. They get a great visual. It's exciting for them. They launch things, but yet they don't realize that they have all these security exploitations, gaps that are obviously available that they haven't even checked out themselves yet. You can run your prompts through QA security analysis. You can do all that, but there's still other things that you need to be aware of, and especially the fact if you're going to go live and go launch to the general public and start taking personal information, you gotta be a lot more sensitive. This is one of these fun little apps you do. Cool. Food app. Whatever. Nothing personal, no PII. That's fine. But if you're gonna get into real deal information, you need to be very security conscious. So that's why we titled, vibe coding is cheap. We all know it's cheap or depends on the AI credits itself. But the real cost will come in like when something goes wrong, you expose someone's information, you have some breach, then it's not only the monetary issue, it's going to be the time involved, the headaches involved, the stress involved, reputation involved. That these are all different things that'll play a part. So that's why we want to touch on these topics. Each of the speakers, Sarah, Cody, and Kunal, are going to be talking about security from a different perspective. And from that perspective, we hope everyone gets a little glimpse of why these topics are super important and why we need to also take that into consideration for, you know, a takeaway from this. After you go away, you go back to your vibe coding, whatever you're building out, or any apps that you're working around, be more conscious about the security aspect of it. That's kind of where we want to touch on the topics today. So we're gonna have three presenters. Sarah was gonna go first, Cody next, and then Kunal. So from there, feel free to drop questions in the chat. While those who are not speaking, they'll see the questions and they may incorporate within the presentation, or we're going to open up the Q&A at the end anyways. So averaging each person 15, 20 minutes along the way, but we're going to leave room for Q&A at the end because we know for sure there's going to be a lot of questions. So with that said, Sarah, I'd like to hand it over to you. Introduce yourself, give a little bit about your background, and why do you want to talk about security of all topics, right? It's not fun. Why are you talking about
It's not
security?
fun. And I'm going to share my screen first because I want to ask the audience a quick question before I introduce myself, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
So I wanted to see, raise your hand if you have used an AI to build a product. Okay. Keep your hand up if you went back and reviewed what you have created. You went back and reviewed what you've created for security. Perfect. Well, that's good. Now, not everybody does that. And this is the gap we're going to be talking about today. Most of you have shipped something with an AI help, almost none, but I know some of you have done that, have gone through line by line to review, and we're going to be discussing that gap. So, quick introduction of me. My name is Sarah. I am an AI and cybersecurity consultant. I want to talk about cybersecurity because I live that every day. So I have been in corporate. I'm a corporate techie. I've been in IT and cybersecurity for the last 30 years. Ouch, that's a lot. But in the last couple of years, I got more into AI and consulting, AI consultation and implementation with security layer. Now, a lot of people deploy AI, but not a lot of people know what to do with cybersecurity. So my goal today is really to kind of enlighten you in what you need to look at. I personally built multiple apps on Lovable, vibe coding. So I am not here to tell you to slow down, but I have felt the pull myself multiple times where I get into that build mode where I don't really check. So I'm here today because I have seen what happened when you don't check. And I'll actually be giving you a lot of real life examples. You all can see my screen.
Yep.
Okay, so today my topic are these four items. One, your MVP is someone else's attack surface. The invisible co-founder, ship fast, patch never, and then you shipped it, you own it. So these four parts that I'm, focusing on, each one is real. Each one has happened to a real company, and most of them did vibe code their way into it, basically. And we're here to make sure that speed does not become the thing that takes you out. So every example that I'm going to be sharing with you guys have happened in the last 18 months, and it's not from years ago. So let's take the first topic. So your MVP is someone else's, attack surface, meaning that when others are using your apps, your platforms, if your platform is not secured, you are exposing their data. Okay, that's one of the ways that it's going to become an attack surface. So, like, let me share an asymmetry that nobody really talks about. We optimize for speed and acquisition, but attackers optimize for access, right? So early stage startups are not targeted despite being small, but they are targeted because of it. Because small companies don't really pay attention to cybersecurity because they think they're too small for attackers to even, target them, but that's actually the main reason they get attacked. So this is like real user data that is being compromised. These are real integrations, and really universally, like nobody is really monitoring. And that combination is not a deterrent, it's actually an invitation to these attackers. So don't think that because you are a solopreneur or you're a small company that you are not going to be a target. Now, numbers don't lie. There was actually a research done, and they scanned about 5,600 vibe coded apps. Out of those 5,600 vibe coded apps, they have found over 2,000 vulnerabilities and 400 exposed APIs and 175 leaked personal data, right? These are PIIs, and this is through the open endpoint. So these were not, careless teams. These were just founders moving fast, just because they're inspired by speed. But and then nearly like 1 in 3 had something exposed that they did not know about. Okay, you will hear me saying did not know about a lot because this is happening not because of carelessness, because people do not pay attention. They did not check, so they did not know. They were not aware. There were API keys that were sitting in accessible codes, user data flowing through endpoints that anybody can reach. And this is not happening because of incompetence, just because nobody went back to check. So once you're done with your, vibe coding or whatever you're building, the key is to go back and check what you have built. There are two critical, security gaps that AI systems often miss and attackers exploit. One is, no input validation. Input validation is like when you have forms and you're taking input from users. If you don't have input validation, you could be open, to attacks, like SQL injection, and scripts that could bypass checks and all kinds of, malicious inputs that could be sent through your input, right? Because if you don't validate, anything and everything can pass through. The other thing is the misconfigured RLS, which is row level security. So AI systems may not properly enforce RLS at times. So users can access data that they should not have. They could access their subscription plan and upgrade themselves. There's actually an example that happened like recently. An app owner was hit with a $10,000 bill because of a misconfigured RLS. Users were able to access their subscription, and they moved themselves to the premium plan. They removed any rate limiting, and they just racked up the bill to $10,000. So that is just like one example. So this is just like an oversight. They're not intentional, attack vectors. But and then when people get access to things, they want to take advantage of it, and they could be preventable. Really, like with the input, you just need to validate. You can whitelist certain, keywords or terms or whatever input that the form should be taking. And the same thing with your RLS, make sure that it is configured and tested. And you make sure that you don't give access to certain parts of your app that users should not. Another example is the T app. Anybody familiar with the T app? So it is a social app. It was built really, really fast and launched fast, but and then attackers got in through a legacy storage that was created at early stage of the building, but and then they forgot about it. So the founders moved fast, they shipped fast, and they even iterated, but and then they forgot to go back and check, and that legacy storage exposed about 72,000 images and even government, 13,000 government IDs. You can imagine government IDs being exposed. This is another PII, exposure. So, I mean, users, when app is developed, and especially when it gets, social acceptance, a lot of people will subscribe to it and they trust it. But and then these type of, exposure, it's not even sophisticated, but and then it compromises people's, personally identifiable information that is going to expose them to more dangers, like their credits being, taken advantage of, etc. So simple things, but the implication could be much, much higher. So every feature that you built is a door, right? It's a door to an exposure to your users. So you got to make sure that every time you describe a feature to an AI and it builds it for you, it makes the decision about how the feature connects to your system, to your data in the outside world. So vibe coding opens those doors without telling you. Some of those decisions create openings that you are not aware of, that it does not tell you, meaning that it could be importing other packages, right, that you're not aware of. So your MVP is not just your product, but and then it becomes your attack surface and it exposes you and it exposes your users. So the invisible co-founder, meaning that, the vibe coding is basically it's delegating what you need done. You tell it what to do, you describe whatever outcome you're trying to get, and then the AI handles the implementation. What that actually means is that the AI is selecting the tools that it's pulling in. It's pulling in third-party libraries, dependencies that you are not aware of, and it makes the decision on the architecture. Now, you've never reviewed any of them, you've never vetted any of them, and now you've got this co-founder that is building things that you are not aware of what it's adding. I've actually spoken to a company that literally just created a tool that vets open source because they have found that attackers have been creating malicious packages, malicious open source packages that are very similar to legit packages where these AI tools are pulling in. So, when they scanned a lot of vibe coded, apps, they discovered that there were so many malicious packages that were pulled in just through the vibe coding because the users were not vetting. So that tool was able to identify these codes, and these could be detrimental, right? Depending on how malicious they are, they could be, ruining, companies' reputation. Um, API key exposure is really one of the most common ones. When your product connects to Stripe, OpenAI, Twilio, or any external services, it authenticates using that secret key, and that secret key, carries the same authority as your login credential. So if they have access to your API key, they can literally charge, they can access a lot of your data. And I mean, they could even rack up your bill because they can overuse your API key. I mean, your API key is where the usage comes through, and then you're billed for the credits. So if you are not really paying attention to where the API key is being stored, you are opening yourself for, I guess, malicious activities, and the consequence could be so much higher. So AI frequently places these keys in client-side layers sometimes, which, the code that runs in the user's browser, and it is really readable by users if they know exactly where where to look for it. So it's not really that technical or sophisticated. It's just a matter of knowing where to look for it. So making sure that your API keys are secured secretly. And I think with vibe coding, and at least I know with Lovable, it actually, you need to tell it that you're ready to enter your API key, and it will give you a prompt to enter that API key. So it will store it, it will encrypt it and store it. So don't just send it through your prompt. Just make sure that you let it know that you have got your API key ready, and it will go ahead and take it. And I think lately I've also seen that when you send API key, it would actually give you a warning that do not send your API key and even delete it or create a new one. So they're getting better. Early on, you would just send it with your prompt and it would take it, but now it's getting better. But whether it is Lovable or any other vibe coding or any AI that you're using, you just want to make sure that your API key is not exposed anywhere on those platforms. So the package hallucination, I've touched on it, a few minutes ago. AI pulls in open source packages, and at times that these could be malicious. And brought this back to kind of go through an example of a company that actually was compromised because of malicious packages that were published from vibe coding. So I won't go through this, fully, but I can share the slides. But this is what happens when you're not inspecting that malicious codes could, packages could get into your code. So that AI co-founder that I mentioned, meaning that we let, vibe coders or AI code for us, build products for us, but we are not really inspecting, or we don't know what it actually is including in the product and the packages that it is pulling in. So it's like someone in your team, is working with a contractor without having any insight to what they're doing. So the thing is, AI assisted development pulls in that dependency, but you're not aware of. But at the end of the day, someone on your team needs to own that question. Not every package, not every line, but do we know what we installed? Or do we know where it came from? That question or that responsibility has to be owned by somebody. When something goes wrong, somebody has to own it. Otherwise, what happens when those vulnerabilities pile up and nobody goes back to check and fix them, right? When I guess health, breaks loose, then everybody's gonna panic. So making sure that there is somebody that takes accountability, that has ownership for the entire, platform, or what are we bringing in? What is being added, and making sure that those are inspected is very crucial. So the vibe coding loop is describe, build, ship, and then repeat. Security does not fit that loop, right? That the iteration almost never includes that security pass. Like every week you don't revisit is a week that vulnerability compounds. Um, Vibe coding just looks for, creating what you're asking it to create, making sure that the code is not broken, right? And then it doesn't really look if it is secure. Now, again, with Lovable, there are times that it gives you warning if there are obvious security, at least issues that it can recognize. It will give you that warning so you can go fix it. Not familiar with the other vibe coding apps, but they may have the same thing. At the end of the day, you are responsible for what you build and what you ship. So again, it's worth going back and checking what you have built. What I'm saying is don't get caught in that loop of being excited to build and ship, making sure that you go back and revisit. Just a little bit of stats. These are numbers from 2024. As you can see, like 45% of the codes that were generated were AI generated codes. And in 2024, nearly half of all those codes were AI generated. And then they had like huge vulnerabilities, like they introduced 45% security vulnerabilities. And honestly, the most telling number is 53% of the founders who shipped AI codes found that security issue after the code was already running in production. Not in staging, not in QA, but after users were already on it. You can imagine how embarrassing that is for a company, especially if it's a larger company. So, I mean, we're talking about 53%. It's not even 20%. So, yeah, these are really big numbers. Again, it is 2024, but and then I mean, things have improved since then, but it's not completely gone. So AI optimizes for it works, not it's safe. So AI does not inherently, vulnerable from the code that it is trained on. It's just the codes that it adds that could add vulnerability. So um, the authentication steps, security always slows things, but it is, secure. But AI coding kind of usually avoids it unless you request for it. The checks are there, you can resolve them, but and then the app itself or the vibe coder itself does not put those security measures in place for you. So it does not, it's not inherently vulnerable, but the code that it builds could be vulnerable. So anything that is causing friction, it would avoid it. It will just move on. So you need to validate whatever it's creating. You need to validate the authentication. Even with authentication, you got to make sure that even though you have login, you got to make sure who's getting access to what. You don't want everybody who has access to the app to have access to everything. So that role-based access also needs to be added. Those are things that you need to tell it. It doesn't automatically create it for you. AI just removes all the errors and it doesn't really think about building that security layer for you. Am I good with time?
Yeah, a few more minutes.
Okay, awesome. So with the missing authentication, I think I just touched on it a minute ago. So uh, typical simple, login is always available. I think everybody knows about just creating a login. Everybody logs in. And I think building those role-based access is kind of where a lot of people lack or not understand it. So before you grant everything to everybody, making sure that you identify who gets access to what part of the platform. You don't want people to have access to the admin setting. You don't want people have to access to where the API keys are stored. You don't want people have to access, to have access to where your reporting are. So authentication is simple, but and then there's more to it when it comes to who gets access to what, and just making sure that you've got that set up. This is another real life example. So the founder of Maltbook said, actually publicly and proudly, that he did not write a single line of the code. AI built the entire product. It worked. Users signed up. The platform scaled. But and then research found that about 1.5 million API authentication tokens were exposed. 3,500 email address, actually 35,000 email addresses were accessible, and then 4,000 of private messages were just exposed. I mean, it's nice to build and ship fast, but when you get this kind of data, honestly, it's like, ooh, what are people thinking? It's embarrassing for a company. So I don't know what it did to their reputation right now, but it's definitely not a good thing for them, even if they go back and, fix it. So last but not least, technical debt is security bill with compounding interest. So every founder, understand compound interest from, the growth side. Revenue compounds, users compound, brands compound, but the same math works in reverse for security debt. Every sprint you build on top of unreviewed foundation increases the cost of that eventual reckoning in the scale of the damage that it really arrives with. Speed is your advantage, but it only stays an advantage if your company can still operate. So when it all goes wrong, who takes the responsibility? Who gets the hit? So you shipped it, you own it. As a founder, you're not protected by I don't know. You are not protected by the AI wrote it. You're not protected by we're moving fast. So if your product exposes user data, that exposure lands on you. So when a breach happens, there is like a natural impulse to point at the tool or to point at somebody, like the AI wrote that or the AI made that call. But that framing does not really hold, right? Like the product is yours. Um, the users consented to your terms of service, like they trusted that relationship between them and you, not between them and the AI or the tools. So the accountability follows the trust, and the trust truly like sits on the founder. So you can't use these as an excuse. So take that responsibility, be the founder that owns up to, I guess, the repercussion. But and then before you even get to that, own that responsibility, do due diligence, and make sure that you build, what is secure, and then you review what you have built. This is just like really the real cost of a breach. So, I mean, there is no a Series B conversation, right? Investors at a seed stage are running basic security diligence. Like acquirers have killed deals in the last 2 years because a technical review surfaced vulnerabilities the founders did not even know that existed. So customer trust does not recover like on a timeline that is friendly to the startup. And then when that story gets written, it is always gets written and the headline is has a founder's name, right? It's not the name of the AI tool. It's not what you used. It has the founder's name or the company's name. So it is your reputation. It could cost you financially because a lot of breaches actually could cause lawsuits. And then, aside from getting sued and having to pay, thousands of millions of dollars, that reputation damage could cost you your future clients, your business, your employees, etc. So, I mean, security breaches are really major. A lot of people don't really pay attention, especially when we are solopreneurs. So, what you actually need to do now, nobody in this room needs to become a security engineer. The ask is just one checkpoint. Before something goes to production, someone that has the context or that understand what the tool or the platform that you've built just needs to review. It's not every line or a full audit, just enough to ask whether the AI made decisions that nobody checked. What are the packages that the AI introduced? Treat these AI generated codes the way you would treat like a strong junior hire. I mean, they have the capability, but they don't have the judgment yet for some consequences. So it definitely needs a sign off. So that way, make sure that use the AI tools, but have that checkpoint. That's pretty much the ask. I think that could save you from a lot of headache. As I've mentioned earlier, these three companies that I've mentioned, the pattern was pretty similar, right? Three different companies, three different products, three different types of exposure, but and then the same root cause every single time. Somebody built something, it got shipped, but nobody went back to check. So that's pretty much the same pattern. So you don't want to fall into that pattern. So what is one part of your product you built with AI that you never went back to check? You don't really have to answer it. Just probably put it in the comment. Something that you want to go back and check, whether it is authentication or your API or whatever packages the vibe coder pulled in, but at least take a note, one thing that you would go back and check.
So,
So that's about it. Yes,
all
sir.
right, perfect. That's gonna give you time check.
Ah, right on time.
There you go.
All right. Well, thank you so much, guys.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That was great. Those have
Thank
questions
you.
come in, and she'll be able to answer them while the other ones are going on. Cody, you're up.
Yes, sir. So, out of curiosity, if you've ever heard of any type of compliance before, put a number one in the chat for me so I can see what level of, let's see. So, we've got a obvious them two. Yep. Okay. Two. Yeah. Three. Okay. Let me know when you can see my screen as well for,
Yep. What's up?
okay. All right. Okay. So compliance is something that a lot of people think is kind of reserved for larger enterprise companies, right? And that's not always true. In fact, it's never true, right? And that's what we're about to find out. Compliance begins the moment you make something public, right? And so compliance has to do with the data that you're storing. We're going to get into that. So this particular session is on data compliance for Vibe coders, but it's really for small business, anybody using AI to develop any sort of solution whatsoever for your business. If it houses data or the public interacts with it, including things like your website, right? So this is going to be very important. Modern builders can launch their software much faster than ever before, but compliance obligations don't disappear just because you move faster, right? So now, when you're collecting, storing, transmitting that data, you have to make these considerations. And you'll see, I really encourage you to do that at the start of your design, not midway through, as some people in chat are kind of pointing at, that now they're kind of really far down the line with their application and they have to go back and secure that, right? So that's important because if you would have made some considerations early on, you could have potentially maneuvered around having to adhere to certain compliances. So we'll dig in a little bit. So my background, I've got 17 years in cybersecurity, AI, and marketing. I've worked for the Department of Defense, now known as Department of War, as well as the Fortune 150 world. I've designed, implemented, maintained, and audited billion-dollar platforms annually, right? So massive platforms. You're talking tens of thousands of devices in these systems, huge platforms. I've held multiple industry certifications, as I'm sure both my peers have as well. I've actually been a part of and led teams into $250,000 audits, right? And if you think about it, an audit is it's just someone checking your stuff. So to charge that amount of money, these are massive deployments, right? So my goal here is not to, like, much like Sarah said, have you just shrivel in fear and go, I don't know how to solve this problem. It's, I want you thinking about this from a perspective of, as I build this thing, when do I need to address this growing problem, right? Because when you first start out in small business, yeah, you can cut some corners, you can get away with some things. Nobody's going to come beat down your door for a little violation. But as you start taking in large sums of money, or you get much more user adoption of that platform, now you need to look at the risk level that you're taking on by not addressing it, right? You begin to paint a much bigger target on your back. So why this matters now, right? Tools like Claude Code, Cursor, Lovable, Bolt, we get there much faster. What used to take months, in some cases years, we can now get there in days or weeks, right? So that means more things are going to hit the market, which is great, but it brings us back to Sarah's point about your features are doors for attack vectors. Every feature you put into your platform is going to create a new place where someone can attack you from, both from a compliance perspective as well as a hacking one. So it's very important. Compliance risk now appears much earlier than founders realize. Again, this is not the day of old where, oh, now you have to adhere to compliance when you've reached X point. It's nope. Right now is when you have to deal with that problem. When you've built that database and you're taking inputs from users who are in the general public, or in some cases, a relationship that you form with a client, that still matters, because if your client is taking data in a system that you built for them and you don't have the proper clauses in your contract to them, that liability can shift from them to you. So you have to be very careful with that stuff. Again, a myth is that compliance is only for enterprise. That's not true at all. So some people I've talked to recently have said things like, I only have a basic business website. Do I still need compliance? And the short answer is usually yes, right? And if you're in the United States, the answer is absolutely yes, because we have the American Disability Act, otherwise known as the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And that means that people who have some form of a screen reader, your application or website has to adhere to that. And if it doesn't, you can be found liable for that. And there are actually companies that exist to go look for people who are not in compliance and go after them. All right. So that it's not just the large companies that this is a problem for. Anything you make that touches the internet in the United States of America has to adhere to that. It's not just us, though. Canada has their own. Europe has their own, right? California has an even more specific form of these things when it comes to privacy, right? GDPR is privacy oriented. And we're all a little familiar with TCPA thanks to GHL. But PCIs are on credit cards, for example, right? So even though you're using a payment processor, say a Stripe, you're not completely out of the woods with what your system has to deal with. It all depends on how you're transacting that data and storing that data. right? But if your site is using any contact form, lead capture, analytics, CRM integrations, right? All this stuff can put you on the hook for something, right? And it's a case by case basis. I can't tell you, across the board, well, you're doing this, so this is what you have to adhere to. It could be any number of things depending on location or industry or any of those sort of factors. So we'll kind of dig into that some. But one simple website can actually hit you with multiple frameworks that you have to adhere to. So can't Claude Code just fix my compliance, right? Can I go into Claude Code and just say, hey, make me compliant? Right? No, you can't, right? It's like if it were that easy, everybody would be doing that. And the answer is no. And the reason why is because of what I just said. Every compliance framework has an entirely different set of rules that you have to follow. Some of those rules have nothing to do with code. They have to do with the data center that your server is in. It has to do with how the data is encrypted. It has to do with physical hardware, right? So there's a number of things depending on what you have to adhere to that makes a difference. Like you see BAA here. This is a business agreement that happens in the HIPAA world. When you're transferring patient data back and forth or medical data, you have to have those agreements with everybody that you do business with. That's not something Clark Code can't make that for you, right? It might be able to help you write it, but it can't do the signatures. It can't put it all that, the different pieces to that. And so it can guide you, but it cannot do it for you. So I'm all for, leveraging AI wherever we can, but that's pretty critical that we pay attention to this. So things like ARIA labels, and this is a good point to what Sarah was saying earlier. I loved the point she said where it works, but it's not safe, right? And one of the things I found, especially when you're leveraging Claude Code or Manus or any of these tools, when it makes, say, a button or a navigation tab, it's trying to get you MVP as fast as possible. It's not trying to bake in security, bake in compliance. It's trying to get to functional and pretty. That's the two things I find it cares most about. And if you leverage a screen reader, say, hey, use my application, use my website as though you were someone with a screen reader, I almost guarantee you will find tons of issues with how that functions right now out of any of these tools. Lovable, Replit, does not matter. So being careful of like basic field encryption, like we were talking about with the API keys and some of the questions in chat. Don't have hard-coded API keys in your code. It should be encrypted in the database somewhere, right? Or in a third-party path that you have to get to in an environment file, right? There's a lot of different answers into how you solve these problems individually that will be answered by your business in particular, right? Everybody has a little different way of how they solve these problems. So the first question is, and this is probably the most important thing you'll hear me say this entire thing. What data are you touching? Where are you touching it? Not where are you, but where are you touching that data? Is it in California where your traffic is? Is it in Europe? Is it in the United States? Is it in Canada? Is it in Brazil? All these countries have their own sort of rules and regulations about how you interact with their consumers. It's very important. In addition to that, what type of data is it? Is it health data? Is it general consumer data? Is it student data? Right? These things matter tremendously, and they all have an additional set of regulations that have to be adhered to. So it's not enough to say, oh, well, I'm ADA compliant, so I'm good. Well, if you're ADA compliant in the medical industry, but you didn't comply with HIPAA, you've got a bigger problem now, right? And so you have to really pay attention to all the layers of this compliance because it can add up very, very quickly. So when we talk about this, what is the governance, right? The governance meaning from a business perspective, who owns this data? Who can access it, right? Who can access it meaning, hey, like I'll use the analogy in chat earlier about the friend that somebody brought over that wasn't really cleared, right? You have some people that you allow in your yard, but not in your house. Some people that, you have different layers of access to you. And the same thing is true in any system. You're going to have people who can maybe only log in, people who can view front end data, people who can view back end data, but not make changes, right? And all of that is a different form of access control. And that's very important because you want to segment who can actually make changes to your system, right? Who gets access to it, who can make changes to it. Because one person can keep two people can keep a secret if one of them's dead, right? You ever heard that analogy? It's kind of the same thing in security. If whoever you give access to needs to be on a list, and you need to know everything that they can do to your system or application. Because when that time comes, like Fur was talking about, when there's an event and the records have to be pulled, you've got to be able to go back and say, Here's who released this information. Here's where that attack vector was open. This person installed that bad malicious package that Sarah was talking about, right? All of this stuff is very important to have what I call the breadcrumb trails back to that source event that caused that, right? So where is it stored? When is it deleted, right? You have to have SOPs in your business about, hey, if we're going to delete users out of that database, the moment you started taking in users in there, especially if it's a compliant one, now you have to have a log of what your processes are. Some fields like law and medical, you don't get to delete data. That's not an option. You have to store it in three different forms in some cases, what we call cold, warm, and hot. Hot means in a 30-day span, you need access to it right now. Warm means in the last 6 months, you need to be able to get it within 4 hours. Or cold could be the last 10 years of records, depending on what industry you're in, right? And that's going to go in, some Amazon storage for long-term storage that you have to, it takes a day to kind of recover, right? But you need to understand what implications you have based on the data that you're storing. And I'll make a key point here in saying most people build outside in, meaning they build what they want their application to look and feel like. When you deal with enterprise companies, oftentimes you actually start on the opposite and you go inside out. So you say, what database am I using? How is it stored? And what data is stored? Then they know the compliances that are a part of that and they can build it as they go. Because it is far more expensive to go back and make something compliant after you've already built it. Right. So real world consequences, right? The ADA and WCAG is not the end of the world, but I will say in often cases, if the worst thing you can do is play completely ignorant and say, I had no idea I had to do this. That's not going to work, right? That's not a legal defense. It's absolutely not acceptable. But it is often cheaper for you to solve the problem first before you find yourself in legal fees trying to deal with these lawsuits that can come up with that one, right? But things like PCI, if depending on the amount of data you have, it can cost you anywhere from $5,000 a month until it's resolved to $100,000 a month in some cases. And these are real world cases as well. I just didn't put the specific companies there. Um, so HIPAA is probably one of the more serious ones you really don't want to get hit with, and they don't play around, right? So Stephen Porter, a sole practitioner, got hit with a $100,000 fine because of a risk analysis failure, right? Like that is something that's preventative. It's totally easily solved, and that negligence is what will get you. And all of these compliance bodies are really big on negligence. If you can show an honest effort in some cases, not all, in some cases, it will really go a long way for you. Show that you understood, knew that you should, and you tried. Might not be perfect, but it will help you a lot for sure. So I think I'll send a lot of these slides have a lot of data on it. So I'd rather send it out, let them look at it after the fact, kind of keep it moving though. But compliance debt isn't just tech debt, which is a term that if you're familiar with, right? That, oh, I built this in a poor way. I need to go back and fix it later. No, it's a complete liability to your business. Businesses have absolutely been bankrupt for a lack of knowledge around compliance that they then found themselves on the hook for later, right? It's not, oh, look, I got 150 users and everybody's paying. Well, now you got $1 million bill because you didn't adhere to the compliances you were supposed to, right? So major compliance frameworks. Now, keep in mind, there's so many frameworks out there. We could talk for 4 or 5 hours on this, and I'm going to hit the highlights here. We talked about ADA, CCPA, and GDPR really have more to do with personal data. So if you've ever gotten into a platform and seen the export my data, delete my data buttons, a lot of times that's around those two, right? Or if you go to a website and you see the do not sell in the footer down there, they're trying to adhere to these particular compliances. FERPA and COPA have more to do with student records, right? So FERPA is the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, and COPA is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Rule. There's so many acronyms, I have to write them down, right? It's absolutely ridiculous. So, yeah, I like that. Yeah. And so anytime you're dealing with student data, it's critical that that is maintained properly. And on the internet, generally, children under 13 have to have parental permission. So there's all kinds of different workflows you have to go through to make sure that that's done properly, right? Before Fur becomes the next Coco Melon, he's got to make sure his law team is ready to go on that, right? He can't just go out there and start putting it out there. SOC 2 is another one. Now, SOC 2 is a little less in like these other ones here. SOC 2 is more of a business system. Do you have the documentation showing what you would do or how you would do it? right? So that's a little more philosophical and documentative than the other ones, which are more literal and can be solved with code in some ways. PCI is around credit cards, TCPA is around, the phones and SMS text outreach. HIPAA is a big one. Sarbanes has to do with financial data. So if you're doing anything in the fintech industry, this is critical that you understand this. And these are not isolated to just the United States. Sarbanes applies in Canada, right? There's so many different ones. And your location of your traffic, right, is what determines what you have to adhere to. Just because you're in Canada, if you're doing business in the US, you have to adhere to the US compliance. You don't get to say, oh, I'm in Canada, it doesn't count, right? There's no home base rule here. That doesn't work, right? So you have to make sure you know what you're dealing with. So this will give you a little bit deeper dive into each of these, and Fur will send these slides out. But consent management and cookies, we've all heard about the cookie sort of system, right? And that has a lot to do with GDPR and CCPA, and PIPEDIA is the one in Canada first. So that's yours right there. Anything you make has to adhere to that. And it has, cookie consent banners and don't sell my info and capturing data before consent. All of these very common themes that you see among many different countries that have developed their own frameworks, right? It's a big push for sure. And California went a step further and they made their own because the US didn't do one that was stringent enough for them, right? So you'll see that all over the place. So FERPA, COBA, we talked a little bit about that, age verifications, missing parental consent flows. These are things that can get you in big trouble here. PCI, are you encrypted in transit, right? So any communication of any credit card data has to be encrypted with not just any encryption. It has to be TLS 1.2 or greater. You can't simply just say, oh, SSL, I got the little padlock, I'm in good shape. That's not true. You have to limit, there are many different types of encryption for that. And you have to make sure that you're on TLS 1.2 or above, right? Tokenization, not storing, those individual numbers, network segmentation. And this is one that goes back to the point of Claude Code can't solve all your problems for you, right? PCI requires your servers be isolated, right? And HIPAA does in some cases as well, where your application server and your database cannot be on the exact same piece of hardware. You physically need two different servers to do that, right? And that's very, very important because when you're dealing with hosting or virtual private servers or whatever, you need to account for that in your design. So HIPAA, right? We talked about the BAAs. You have to sign that with your hosting providers, encryption at rest and in transit, right? So you immediately see a difference here. So now when the data for health or patient data is in your database, it has to be encrypted while it's sitting still, not even being accessed, right? So now all of this has cost associated with it, right? When you're talking about HIPAA, PCI, the logs that are associated with it create enormous cost. So all of that matters, right? um, Restrict PHI handling, log access, validate encryption, all that stuff. SOC 2, again, we talked about strict access controls, things like role-based access, right? So you want to make sure that you have a view, you have a read-only, you have a write, right, at each of the different levels that you need. So TCPA, and then finally take the cookie, right? Take the cookie, Neo. So we've looked at a lot of different frameworks. There's a ton of rules that have to be followed here. Don't try to bend the spoon. Pretend the laws of physics don't apply to your code. It does. The moment you make something, like she said earlier, you ship it, you own it, right? That's on you now. You gotta know what risk you're taking. And the biggest thing is as you're doing this, it's okay to ask Claude Code questions like, because I'm using an application and I'm storing data like this, what do you think I have to adhere to? What compliances could I be opening myself up to? And that's a great starting place. It truly is. But I would say, especially once you start making some money, you quickly need to get a lawyer to look that over and say, no, actually, because you're doing this and this, there's two more compliances you have to adhere to, right? And that stuff can add up pretty quickly, right? So identify the data collected, identify the jurisdictions, like where did the users actually live at, identify the vendors, any sub-processors. And a sub-processor is somebody, like in the case if you're white labeling GHL, for example, right? When you white label GHL, that risk is actually transferred to you. So now if there's an issue with something inside of GHL that you built, they're not on the hook for it. You are, because you sold that to someone as a solution. So now anything that you're doing and offloading to something else is a sub-processor of you. All that has to be accounted for as well, right? So identify storage locations, things like retention. How long do you have to store this data? Because I'll tell you what's worse is if you had data and you deleted it, now you're going to have a problem because when they come knocking on that door, you have to show evidence of the data that was there. And if you deleted it because you didn't know that you were supposed to, that's a violation. It's going to be a big violation with a lot of fees, right? So much better to understand what you're doing there. So identify the exposure points with logs, screenshots, test environments, right? These things are critical. Identify any missing controls, understand your gaps and start to fix these things. So compliance is not anti-speed to Sarah's point, right? My objective is not to say, hey, I don't want you using these tools. You shouldn't use these tools. They're bad. No, it's use them intelligently, understand your risk as you're building it. Right now, if you're not making any money, hey, it's a little bit of risk. That's what it is. But as you get bigger, you need to go, all right, now we're at, 50 users. And I remember that dude saying that HIPAA was $75,000 per row entry that went into my database. If I'm not doing this correctly, I could have a big issue on my hands that is way outside of the money that I can afford to pay it, right? Ignorance and negligence are not going to work when someone comes knocking on your door about your issues. So you have to be absolutely certain you know what you're dealing with. Start with Claude Code, talk to a lawyer, right? Again, this is general advice only. First said he's going to take care of any lawsuit that comes up. That's what I heard anyway. But that's it for me. I'll stick around for Q&A for as well. But yeah, definitely take this stuff serious. If you have any questions, reach out to me, Facebook, Instagram. I'm usually on Facebook. I'll be honest. I'm a little bit older. I don't really like the Instagram thing. Moves fast. Don't make sense to me. You gotta be honest.
All right, thanks a lot, Cody. I appreciate it. And yeah, you know what? I'll give everyone some virtual bucks with our new wallet platform. We'll create a virtual platform and give everyone virtual bucks. That's how we'll compensate for all the lawsuits. All right. For every error, here you go, $1 million. No problem. Go cash it out somehow. Awesome. Thank you very much. All right, Kunal, let's go. So hold on, I'm gonna preface this one. Kunal and I go back and forth quite a bit on this, and when I was getting into vibe coding, I'm talking about Lovable. He's like, ugh, Lovable, ugh. Like, why using Lovable? Ugh, you use Claude Code. So that was the vibe I got when I started on the vibe coding, and then I started working on Lovable. Then I realized why everyone started shifting onto Claude Code and others, because you start hitting a certain ceiling, a certain point, certain things happen, and you just can't handle it anymore. But I think everyone has to go through there because when I got the Lovable edition, I'm like, wow, it's the greatest thing in the world. Then you start hitting your limits. Then you start realizing you need to start getting better LLMs, better technology, better enhancements. And what I've been doing lately is I do both actually. I have one platform on Lovable, and I just go to Claude and ask it questions, and I use Claude to triage everything because I don't trust Lovable's answers because he gaslights me sometimes with the wrong stuff. I'm like, nope, I don't trust you. I go to Claude. Claude's like, that's absolutely wrong. I'm like, I knew it. So I will use Claude as I'm literally copying and pasting all day long. No, I don't. Whatever you tell me what you can do, don't do it. Hold on, Claude, yes or no? Yes? Okay, go ahead. So that's what I'm doing back and forth all day long because I don't like proceeding with Lovable anymore as much as I used to. But let's now get into your presentation about vibe coding. Lawsuits
Right.
are not cheap.
Right. Let's start with this. Lovable is great as long as you build a tool that's internal to you and it's not given out publicly to anyone else without reviewing extensive security things. If you're just building something for yourself, if you're building something as a wireframe, a quick something to give to your team and get that done properly, absolutely use Lovable. It's fantastic for that. Now, that said, let's get into the actual security issues that are there with Lovable. And it's not just a Lovable thing, it's just AI enabled coding in general. Okay, so by coding, everyone's doing that. You know how it works. You have an idea, you describe it, AI builds it, you ship it, and it's done. It's fantastic. I actually have a friend, I've known him for like 40 plus years now, and he doesn't have a single technical bone in his body. And he's had this idea for a while. It took him 3 days on Lovable and with some help from Cloud Code to build a tool that he wanted to ship out. And that was fantastic that he was able to get that thing out. So for those kind of things, it is great. Lovable, Bolt, Cursor, Replit, all of these tools really have democratized software development. But there are issues with that nobody really talks about because everyone is concentrating on the one thing, which is the speed of getting things done. And before we go any further, I want to sort of reframe your app in a context that makes I tend to understand concepts better when I have an analogy that's simple to understand that everyone understands. So I'm going to use the analogy of a bank and your app. So every time a user, you create an app, but it could be anything, could be a lead magnet, you're just getting their name and email, or it could be something, the next Facebook, whatever you're building. It doesn't really matter. You're gathering some data. Every time a user gives you their email address, their payment details, their health information, what they're really doing is they're handing stuff that's valuable to them over to you. It's like they're trusting you. And what you've become, in my analogy, is effectively a bank. So you have your vault, which is full of your customers' valuable stuff. And then what they expect is the next time I come around, I'm still going to find all of my stuff. It's going to be safe, it's secure, nobody's stolen it, nobody's changed it. It's just there for me to come back and look at it. So it's the same thing. You go to bank. When was the last time you went to a bank and you asked the teller, "Hey, I'm going to deposit $5,000. Are you sure you guys are safe? Is my money going to be there tomorrow?" You never ask that because there is an implicit assumption. I'm going to a bank. I'm giving some stuff, and it will be safe. And whether you like it or not, every customer who signs up for your app has the same basic assumption. I'm giving you my data. I assume that it is safe. And there is a security uh, problem with wipe coded apps, but the thing that we need to understand is why is it specifically a wipe coded app and not a human coding an app? And this is the point that I want to start with, which is the reason um, why the problem is more with wipe coded apps um, is that AI was trained to ship something that just works as quickly as possible. It wasn't trained to build it right. It was trained to make it work and just ship it as quickly as possible. Could the same security issues be with human generated code? Yes, and they absolutely are. It's actually the reason why security audit firm companies exist. All they do is audit your code for security. They'll find out issues and they'll fix it for you. It's why Amazon also, I was a senior software dev at Amazon for 4.5 years. And Amazon has an internal security certifier program. Not every engineer doesn't have to go through that. It's a voluntary program. You have to volunteer to go get trained and then certify all the other services. You don't get paid extra. You don't get anything extra. You just have to volunteer for that. I was part of that. 0.3% of Amazon secure engineers go through that program. I was part of that 0.3%, which is why I kind of understand why this happened. So it was my volunteer job to make sure that any service, the shipping service that you type in your address or the cart that you have on Amazon or the product search service, any service at Amazon, it was job of a volunteer engineer like me to make sure that it was secure before it was launched. And typically, it would be a 3 month process before you would decide your launch date. And 3 months before that, you would start the whole engaging a security certifier internally. And there is a reason for that. And the reason is that almost a super majority of developers, including developers at OpenAI, Google, big tech, any of these things, they don't think of security when they write code. They just write code, just like AI, to get stuff done. Slightly more secure than they'll think of a few more things because there's always a senior engineer who's doing something. So that happens. And the reason, and this kind of brings me to why AI generated code is insecure, because all these coding LLMs are trained of billions of lines of code on GitHub and other free repositories. And guess who's written those software over there with the code? It's regular engineers who don't know enough about security. And so the majority of data that these LLMs are trained on is insecure code. And it's designed to take the average, the highest probability of the average next thing that comes. And so it's designed to pick the most of average of what it sees the most, which is insecure code. And that's why you have this security issue specifically with wipe coded thing. It's not like the AI is bad and it's trying to break you. It just doesn't know what secure code is because it's never been trained on that. There are parts of it you can give it specific instruction and that'll mitigate the issue a little bit. in some cases quite a bit, but it's never going to completely take away security vulnerabilities from your code. In fact, there's a company called Veracode that tested about 100 different LLMs, and they found about 45% of the code that all LLMs generate had some security vulnerability in it. So here's the thing. It's not, you have a white coded app, you didn't know about security. It's not your fault that your code is not secure, but it is your responsibility because that is something that you have created and you are giving it to your customers. The implicit assumption over there, that social contract is, I'm asking you for your data. I am going to keep it safe for you. Okay. So I know Sarah brought this example up earlier as well, but Morebook is the best example out there right now. White coded, 1.5 million API keys exposed, 35K email addresses exposed to anyone on the internet. And this wasn't a sophisticated attack. This wasn't somebody trying to hack. This was more like there are a bunch of scanners, somebody scanning and found that open thing and then got that done. Actually, it's a funny incident. This happened a few years back. Facebook had created a mini app for a while. This was created by Facebook, and they found there were 125,000 username and passwords in plain text in a text file in an openly available drive on the internet. So it's not AI, it's humans which is causing this security problems with AI. So we're going to talk about, there are actually lots of security vulnerabilities. I'm going to talk about the top 5, give you a glimpse of, scare you a little bit, a lot more, and then we're going to go into a free tool that you guys can use to mitigate some of that. So this is again very well covered, exposed API keys. The way I try to think of it is, it's like a master. You have a bank, you have a vault. Inside the vault, you have all of these individual deposit boxes. So your API key being exposed is the same as you took the master key to your vault and just taped it outside your front door of the bank. Anyone who walks by can take that key and now can walk and open your vault. This is one of the easier fixes. There are simple prompts that fix it. And the fix in this case is just take it off the front door, go put it behind the desk of your teller, which is the equivalent of your backend code. Keep API keys in the backend where nobody sees that. It's not in your front end. The front end can make a call to get that API key or get it decrypted, but it's not stored in your front end code. Remember, all of your front end code is HTML that is on the browser. You can see that code by doing right-click, inspect, and all of that code is visible for you, including any API keys that you have in the front end. Okay. The next one we're going to talk about, again, Sarah's also pointed this out, is the database access controls are off. Now, most white-coded apps use either Supabase or Firebase. Firebase belongs to Google. They just make it, they're what's called as database as a service, which means you don't have to set up a bunch of things. You can just directly query and create tables. That's great. It's great for speed. The problem is that now anyone can see your entire database schema. And by default, because it's not trained on security, when it creates these projects, it doesn't set up any secure things. So the banking equivalent of this is you have a vault. Inside the vault, you have individual deposit boxes. And ideally, every owner would have their own key. But because I did not set anything, any security or what I call as row-level security policies on my tables, that's the effectively, I have all of these deposit boxes and there are no keys. They're all unlocked, which means anyone who's in the vault can now see, peek inside, look at or take any data that is there in any of the deposit boxes. This is one of those things that you don't want to just have a simple prompt fix it. There are different, this is where you want to bring in somebody who understands database schema, data modeling, and see what needs to be controlled, what needs to be restricted, and what is okay to just be publicly available. The next one that we're going to talk about is missing auth checks. And this is basically, you design a website, you have a login page, and a lot of times what it'll do is it'll create the login page and it'll do the whole thing that and my username password, and it takes you to the next thing. But then there are a bunch of other pages which should have been locked behind that login page. And it didn't really lock that. And the banking equivalent that I talk about is that you walk up to a teller, to see your deposit box, and the teller's like, yeah, go on, that's okay. I don't need to see your ID. Just go in and do whatever the hell you want. And so you want, this is again auth logic, and there are paths. If you really understand your app well, maybe you could do the prompt to do that. But again, this is something that you want somebody else to take a really good look at. What are you protecting behind the authentication page? And not just what, there are levels. Both Cody and Sarah talked about this, that there are some data that you want to see, which is user level data. But then I am on your team, and I'm an admin. I see a bunch of other things. And so you need to have those roles and policies defined properly so that the right person, based on what their auth parameters are, they get to see the right data that they should see. Okay. The next one is, this is an interesting and also the hardest one to explain in general, cross-site scripting, XSS. And the idea over here is a lot of people take input, they have forms, another thing where you're allowing people to type in whatever the hell they want. And then you click a button and it goes to your backend and it gets stored. But you did not check that on a field called last name, was it a name or did I put a script tag or something else, which now got stored in your database? And then when somebody next time logs in, that, because you've not designed it properly, it'll bring that data, a script in, embedded into your HTML file, and it'll execute that. The best example that I have is a lot of people have heard about these ATM card skimmers. There are people who bring this whole thing and put it in front of an ATM. And when you put in your card, instead of the whole thing going to the bank, they skim your ATM details and they take out your money. And that's kind of exactly like very similar to how XSS works. Somebody's pushed in this malicious code. You don't know it as an app owner because you didn't have the checks for whether these things are happening or not. And now everything works or seems to work exactly how it should. But when you enter your data, something, maybe the data gets stolen and goes somewhere else, it hijacks your session or does something else. But this malicious code is doing stuff that you don't want to do. This is, in some cases, easily fixed. The simple answer is do input validation, sanitization. Make sure that if it's not, there are certain things that it should not store, uh, remove those things. But the thing is, a lot of people do this half, where they'll, yeah, I did input validation on the UI, but I forgot to do the same thing on the backend. And that's the biggest risk with this. You want to do it on the UI, but you also want to make sure that you have it on the back end. In fact, if you're only going to do it in one place, do it in the back end, skip the front end. The reason for that is everything actually goes to your backend and gets stored and gets brought back. Even if I didn't go through your UI, I can look at the network tab on my browser, see exactly what call is going, and I can use something like Postman and send that exact payload or my malicious payload if there is no input validation on the backend. So make sure when you do this, you do it on both sides.
Now, there's an example, I think, a few months ago or a year ago where on high level where someone were submitting on the form. They weren't hitting the form. They just went on the code itself and they dropped about 100,000 or 200,000 contact registrations, which then flooded that person's workflow, which then flooded them with, all the single 1 cent, 1 cent, 2 cent costs, which then charged their wallet a couple $1,000s. It became an exponential issue very quickly, all happened within 15 minutes, all because they went through their backend API and they just went at it.
Happens all the time. I did that. GS is a lot more secure right now than a few years when I started this. I did that to our own account to test a bunch of things, and we were able to create 4,000 sub accounts just through script in 15 minutes versus the simple thing that takes a while to do that. So have it on the back end and also have it on the front end, these kind of things. All right. The fifth one that I want to talk about is expose source maps. This is kind of like you have a bank, you have the blueprint of the bank, and you took that and you're just passing it off to anyone at the front gate who wants to take a look at that. So what happens with white coded apps is there's a setting when you compile the code. A lot of times it goes as debug. And the reason why you want to do it in debug is I want to step through my code and see if something is working the way it should work or not, or maybe there's a bug that I'm trying to debug, I'll do that. If you don't change that settings, and Lovable is actually pretty good at changing this setting, but there are other vibe coding tools which will not change this compile setting. If you don't change it, it'll ship your production code with the entire what is called as a source map, which is effectively your actual source code attached for every single file that you've created. Anyone can right click and take a look at all of your actual source code, download that, and effectively analyze that to seeing, okay, I have this blueprint. I see that this is a place from, this is a good attack vector. I can go from here because the windows are always open. They have the best locks in the front gate, but on the on level one, there is a window on the back next to the backyard where the window is always open. So I'm just going to attack from there. And so this is also a fairly easy thing to fix with prompt. You know, we've covered this, and a lot of people think of like yeah, sure, I have like 5 users. If I grow, I'll have maybe 100. Who's gonna care about me? Nobody, no hacker's gonna, try and find that. And you're right, no hacker is worth their while is actually going to physically go find your website and do that. What they'll do is they'll write a script, and that script will do the job for them. It took me 5 minutes when I was building the Is It Secure web tool. It took me 5 minutes to write code using Claude Code, which scanned and gave me the URLs of 971 lovable apps. 5 minutes. That's all that it took me to write the code. Another 6 minutes of running, and I have 971 lovable app URLs. I'll couple that with another script that just finds which ones have API keys and database tables. And I have a nice little list of leads for me to market my secure vibe coding business. Don't do that. What's going to happen with these kind of things is you will lose trust, which is our biggest problem with these things. When data on your platform gets leaked, there's financial impacts. There are other things, but the biggest thing that you, in my personal opinion, the biggest thing that you lose is the trust of your customers. And that trust, once lost, takes an extremely long time to come, if ever. There's some statistics around like 37 point something percent of the people, if they find that a company has had a data breach, will never buy anything from that company again, ever. Even if they came back and fixed everything, those customers are just lost. They'll never come back. Okay. Um, GDPR fines, extremely expensive. There are other fines that Cody talked about, extremely expensive. It costs you less than a tenth of that first fine to just secure it right from the beginning. And that's what you need to do. The mind shift that needs to happen is everyone thinks of security as, let me just get it out, let me ship it, I'm going to get some product market fit, and then I'll come back and bolt on security. Security is never a bolt on. It's the foundation that you start on. If that foundation is weak, you can bolt on all the security that you want. It'll always be a band-aid, which will have some breaking points there. Okay, so I walked through 5. Here are some more in case 3 of us didn't scare you enough. There is a list of a few more that you can read and get scared of. I'm not going to go through all of those. We're kind of running out of time. But I'm happy to talk about all of these with anyone after the call in the Q&A session whenever you want. So there's some good news. There are different levels of security issues. The tool that I built, we categorize into tier 1, tier 2. Tier 1 is mostly simple things that we have a prompt. That prompt, for the most part, will fix those issues. So those are quick wins. If you have an app, we grade your app. Most apps tend to fall under F, which is you failed security completely. There's nothing secure about your app. Tier 1 tends to get you from F to C. Tier 2 is where you want somebody who knows about security and software design in general to take a review with that, review those things and get it fixed. From C to A is what tier 2 would get. Now F to C, C is still better than F, but no matter what your grade is, you are still liable for any security issues that happen, from your app. So tier 2 will just get you to A, which is supposed to be secure enough that you won't get hacked. The one thing that I would want to talk about is that you can add all the security in the world. No app is unhackable. The only thing that you do is make it not worthwhile a hacker's time to spend the time in trying to hack your app. That's all that you can do by adding these multi-layered security layers. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to do a quick demo. If anyone has a white coded app and they want to put it in the chat, we can quickly run a security scan for that. Is it secure.ai? I actually knew that you were going to put that. So I did run it and I'm at a B. But the two issues that I have, I am comfortable with those because I'm not storing any data. Anyone has any other thing that they want to do? I have an example of an app that completely failed. So I can show if you don't want to test your app, I'm happy to show what it does. Social Muse, Super Auditor app.
It'd
Well,
be embarrassing though if you find that I should have with my app.
This is a safe space right here. It's a
That's
safe
right.
space.
yeah.
This is the best place for it to happen.
Not live. I'm still going through security audits. That's my
You are.
disclaimer. Let's see how bad it is today.
This is there.
You about to
I
add
know
to
what. I
Sarah's
know what. I know
slide.
what.
Well, you don't have the validation there.
Maybe it's
I
just
do.
too good.
It didn't let me till I added that. I just need to make it easier where it automatically adds that. Anyways, let's see what happens with we're doing superauditor.app.
I'll be
Mm.
honest, I would not
You
really
are
go
a
back
D,
in.
Mm.
sir.
D.
Uh,
Oh man, I've never got a D in my life.
D.
better than an F. It's rated D. It found that you're using Vercel
Yeah.
for your front end with a 95% confidence
Wait.
score.
It's found I'm using what?
Vercel.
Vercel.
This is furs.
This is
Oh,
first. This is not yours.
Yeah.
We can do yours right after this. It's
Vercel is
Vercel.
bad.
Uh,
Are you saying Vercel is bad? Or you're
No,
just
it isn't.
sharing? Oh, okay.
It's
Okay.
it's just this is information. It's just telling you what's the detected architect infra that we've some for my app it's AWS. For this is Vercel for
Okay.
Lovable that gave you Superbase and one more thing. So
see
that's fine.
what
This is informational. What it's telling you is it total 8 findings, 3 quick fixes, 5 expert reviews. And it tells you everything that we've scanned, what they've passed. There's either no authentication or authentication is fine, no exposed secrets, database is fine or doesn't exist. Uh, these are basically cores and headers issues that should be a fairly quick fix. So it gives you a spider web of where your issues are. I am just gonna
I don't know. I wouldn't give me a D on that one. I would argue for a C. That's
see me after class.
a
after
harsh,
yeah.
you're a harsh
Right,
marker.
right.
Patel, what email should I use so you get a report?
Hello at Wizards of Social.
You know what? Just paste that email.
Yeah, all right. Come on, man. You know all about wizardry.
I don't want to type.
So Kunal, we're migrating mine of Lovable. Do you recommend AWS? I thought it would be too expensive. But I saw your
Oh, I would love to have a chat with you if you think AWS is too expensive. Okay, I have two apps. One is Brandport, one is HaleyY. HaleyY, when we were doing 80, when we reached 80,000 customers, 361 agencies, it was on AWS. Our monthly bill was $23.76.
Mhm.
So AWS is expensive if you don't know what your right architecture is and how you use that. I knew because I worked at Amazon, we were taught about internal frugal things. So I've used that. I'm happy to talk to you about
Yeah.
your
Yeah, I
architecture.
think I looked at the EC2 spec for another app, and that's what I was basing it
You
off of.
killed it.
But
Again, this is the EC2 thing is why your AWS is expensive. Everyone thinks that they need 24/7 servers. I hate to burst your bubble. It'll be years before you'll need 24/7
no, I'm
servers.
happy. I'm happy you burst my bubble because now I feel good. I'll move it.
Use functions, AWS Lambda, bring your cost down to under $10 a month. All right. So it
Wow.
gives a full scan of everything, and then it also tells you what your high severity issues are. This is a missing content security policy header, the prompt that you can copy and paste. Uh, I think it found a local host URL. Now, Trump first said that this is
It's
not
not
live,
live.
so this might
Yeah.
be fine. This is the one that it talks about X frame option header. There's a prompt that you can get that fixed. And there is one more. This is CORS allowed all origins. In some cases, this is fine. Now, if this is a Lovable app, it's probably fine because you're using Lovable's backend. What basically this means is that it's allowing any app to send API calls to your backend. Typically, you want just if it's super app superauditor.app is that if that's the only URL, you want your backend course to say only accept requests from superauditor.app. So the browser itself will not send a request for those. But because it's on Lovable, this should be fine because Lovable is not going to go and add. Maybe they'll add that feature at some point, but right now they don't do that where they go and add individual URLs in there. So that's there. The inner HTML is the part which actually requires code review. And the problem with that is this could be one of two things. One of them is completely benign. It is an external package that your code has dependency on, and that's using internal HTML, which is effectively saying that without sanitizing, it's just putting some HTML over there. That's prime risk for SQL and code injection. If it's a third party, well-known app or package, you are for the most part safe. If it's your code, then there is possibly an issue where why are you using inner HTML, and we can look at that and get that fixed. Dangerous set inner. So again, similar, it could be a third-party package or your own package. We're going to go through some of that and
So
that.
Kunal, when I used your program, and
Yeah.
for this is something you can do, you can actually highlight the entire page and dump it into ChatGPT and get all this back in a good format that pastes back into say Lovable. Have Lovable build you a fixes.md file so that it can iterate over that file and continue to work through fixes until it finishes. I love this tool. Like big fan of this tool. This thing is fantastic.
Thank you.
Awesome. And
All
this
right.
one is mine.
Sorry?
Now, is this my app or
That
first?
This
one's
one is
first still.
actually
Fur
First.
had
first.
a
Let's
lot of
let's hit,
problems.
hit someone else up. What did I get? I got two high risks and four mediums.
Yeah.
All right. Who's gonna
Could be
top that?
worse.
What's
Could be
next?
worse.
Let's do socialmuse.ai. Sarah, I'm gonna put you on spot since
Let's
you.
see.
This is a free tool, guys. Anyone can use it. You get
Yeah.
up to three free things. If you want to chat about things, 30 minutes, book a call, free consult for 30 minutes, and I'll tell you what I can. If you have somebody on your team and you know somebody else who can do it for you, I'll help you get it done. If you want my time, we'll talk about how to get my time. But let's see what Sarah has.
And to be fair, I ran Lovable's built-in scanner right before using yours, right? And
Yeah.
yours caught a tremendous amount more than what Lovable. So anybody that thinks Lovable scanner is satisfactory, it is not. I promise you.
Lovable scanner is very superficial.
Hmm.
Yeah, listen, hold on
Right,
one
you
second.
actually have database security issues, ma'am. 20 issues, ma'am. Some of those, so it flags things. Okay, Sarah, you wanna give me your email so I can send you the report as well?
Yep. Sarah@sable.com. SARA at SAIBBLE.com.
SAIBBLE.com.
No, BBLE, Sable. Let me drop it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right. Where do I have that in phone number? All right. 4 high severity issues. You have CloudFront, Cloudflare, Pages, Workers, and Supabase as your backend, likely a lovable app. Let's just jump to the interesting parts, which is, and this is the part that I want to, most of these would be similar. There are some, like Lovable just doesn't set this by default. No vibe coding app sets this by default. You need to have specific instructions around setting your security headers. So we're going to skip all of these, and we're going to go to this,
Mm-hmm.
the database stuff. And now some of these, so your read is exposed, so anyone can read. The app was able to read 3 rows. Create is blocked, so you can't I can't create any records. Update and delete, it said uncertain. And the reason, so that to me is somebody needs to review it. The reason why it says uncertain is that Superbase, what it does is when you make a request to something, if that's not allowed, or if it's allowed, or even if it's in some cases not allowed, it sends back the same HTTP response, 204. So from the HTTP response, there is no way to know whether it actually is a problem or not. In this case, what's likely happened is that it's tried to create records, couldn't verify a manual check is required. So in most cases, most of your tables will be uh, similar. There'll be update and delete, which is uncertain. I have seen the 971 lovable apps that I scanned. I saw at least 6 where I could create, update, delete anything on all tables, including user records, the place where they have email, first name, everything. They didn't have any security at all. Now, I don't think those are deployed. They're probably just playing around with it, but I can find those and people can extract those things. You have a SQL injection risk. This would need to be looked at. Uh, but the part that I find really interesting, you have a lot of medium security risks. PII, you have a name. So there are certain columns that tend to store PII. It wasn't able to read. If it was able to read, it will actually show you masked data that it was able to extract. Name tends to be a PII column. So does first name, last name, middle name, email, SSN, a bunch of other things. So it'll look at some of those and tell you, now maybe in credit packages, name isn't. Uh, you know your data model better, and maybe it's just a random name that you're using just to categorize something. And in that case, it's fine. It's not really PII. But if it is actually PII, you want to make sure that it's encrypted.
So
Or
there is no PII, but I'm curious because people are integrating their social platforms. Do you think maybe it's reading their names from those social platforms?
so in this, I'll show you what the thing is, and
Yeah.
this is what I sometimes love, but a lot of times don't love about Superbase is I know your exact data model, every single table, because Superbase lets me read your entire database schema. I know every single table, what column each one of these has, and I also know how they are eventually when I get there. You have a lot of tables, how they are actually related to each other. This is a very large app. And uh, this is your entire ERD. So I can zoom into and see every table, all the relationships. But the problem over here is because I know your entire database schema, I know this is the blueprint to your database. I know exactly what I can plan my attack if I wanted to. Take a look at all the different tables, see which ones are storing the right thing, go and register as dummy users, try and break that. But this is my biggest problem with using Superbase directly, which is what most white-coded apps do. They'll expose uh, the actual database tables in a public namespace so that you can directly call. They also give you functions, which is where you would put your tables in a private schema, so this wouldn't show up, and you would call functions which would actually write the data. That goes against the principle of database as a service, but it is a hell of a lot more secure because I don't have the blueprint of your entire app. Right now, I have every single table, every single column, every single relationship, how you design things. That makes it easy for me to plan on how I'm going to break your app. I'm not going
A
to do
lot of
that, but
information.
yeah.
A lot of information. But luckily, I don't plan to keep it on Superbase on Lovable, so it
Yeah.
is moving over.
Yeah.
That's why I keep telling everybody you can build it there, but don't leave it there.
All right.
Because
Since I have built this tool to only give 3 free thing, I can take one more before my tool locks me out. Who is up next? Or we can just switch over to Q&A. Everyone has access to the URL. Each one of you gets 3 free tries, 3 different apps. So feel free to test it.
Just for those who are using Lovable as a starting point, Superbase comes included with it. Do you recommend they just set up their own Superbase and connect it that way? So they have the flexibility of porting off faster? Or don't even start with Superbase, go to AWS on their setup. What's your opinion to this?
You know my opinion. So my opinion is I am a big I'm also partly biased. I will say I have a bias because I've worked at Amazon for 4.5 years. I've seen how amazingly scalable things and how secure things can be over there. So I am biased about that. I have built two apps, which is effectively our bread and butter right now. Both of them are deployed on AWS. So my thing would be that you deploy it on AWS if you can. That said, I do have an unfair advantage that I am an engineer
Mhm.
by profession. So I know how to get those things done much faster. If you are not techie, AWS can feel overwhelming. It can feel like it's going to be extremely expensive if you go with the typical. And if you're going to use Claude Code to, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Can you design an architecture for me? It'll almost 100% give you the most expensive architecture on AWS because it is optimizing for AWS scale. I want to build an app, so I'm just going to build it for on day one, I'll have 5 million people signing per second, so I'm just going to build it for that. It'll 100% give you the most expensive architecture. And that's where having somebody who knows some of the internals of AWS, in my case, I know in AWS, if you're dealing with somebody who works on Google or Azure, they have their own internals. Working with somebody like that, at least for your initial architecture, makes a lot of sense. It's that part I compare those things of where you're spending time in going over your architecture, the security of the app, the data model, these three things. I compare those to sharpening your axe. Spend time sharpening your axe so that when you're actually chopping trees, it's a whole lot faster. Uh, yeah.
I would add to that, like consider the application you're building, right? Like in book writing, you don't consider every book that you write to be the one you're going to make a run at a New York bestseller, right? Sometimes you use smaller publishers. In that case, Supabase and Lovable isn't the end of the world. But if this is going to be your brand pod, your big Hey Levi's, these tools are very, very big tools, then you want that on a platform that is secure and scalable, right? If it's an internal tool, so what, right? Like get it done fast, get it in there, make it secure, sure, but it's not the end of the world that it's on the best platform ever. Because there definitely is, and I think for anybody's experience, learning AWS is worth it. It's definitely worth it. It takes a little bit of time, but once you get the understanding of it, then you also kind of understand them all. Like GCP, which is Google's version, and AWS, they're all very similar. They just nickname things differently. That's pretty much how it works.
Yeah, got
I
it.
think it's
Yeah, I think you touched a really good point that it depends on the app. If it's an internal tool or a small thing that you're just building something for your family or a small group of friends, and you know that you're going to keep it restricted to a small bunch of users, Lovable, Superbase with the right security policies. At no point should you skip security policies. Take a look at that. But using Lovable for something like that, where you know it's not going to scale, you don't need that scale, it's perfectly fine. In fact, it's the right thing to do. It's easy to deploy and everything. AWS, great for a bigger beast. Cloud Code, I would personally, I am a big fan of Cloud Code, a huge fan of Cloud Code. Um, it's it's a little more of a learning curve than Lovable. Lovable has no learning curve. You just spit out words and it asks you questions. You spit out more words, it spits out code, and you're done. Uh, Cloud Code is a little bit of more learning curve, but it's absolutely worth the time you spend on Claude Code. Once you are able to master Claude Code, uh, like Fur was saying, he uses Lovable, but Lovable is like the small child that does something, and then you have the teenage or the college kid who goes and makes sure that everything's fine, and you use Claude Code for that. So you can use it with Lovable, you can use it with Replit, anything. The big thing is that when you decide that, okay, I want to go to AWS or GCP or Azure, Claude Code will help you build all of those pipelines to get it deployed and everything.
yeah, just Angela just made interesting comment because I ran into the same issue on the weekend. Just keep in mind that disclaimer is real. AI makes mistakes. Sometimes do a gut check because I was arguing with it saying, no, we should do this. Like, no, we shouldn't do it. We should do this. I'm like, okay, you must know better. A whole day goes by. I came back like, you know what? Do this. I don't care. Then it does this, like, oh, you were right. I'm like, oh my God, I wasted like 12 hours troubleshooting it when I knew I could have done it this way. I was 99% sure until it told me I was wrong. Then I'm like, okay, you must know better. So, absolutely. Well, let's skim some of the questions here. So, what Jason asks, is there a way to lock down Supabase? Or that's just nature of it.
Ways to lock down, as in like just make certain rows secure, or there are two different ways that I am aware of with Superbase.
I
There's
think he's looking for just system hardening generally.
yeah, so there's RLS, which you absolutely should do, row level security policies where you define who has access, what can they do. The other way, which is what I prefer, is like we saw with Sarah's app. And sorry, Sarah, I'm gonna use your app as a very really good example right now because most apps on Lovable get built like that. Um, we're able to see all the tables, and that becomes a problem because I now know everything. And the reason why I'm able to see all the tables is that by default, vibe coding apps, when they create tables, they create it in a public namespace, which means they're specifically designed to be callable over Superbase's REST APIs. So you can directly call an API to write the table, read from the table. They also give you functions. And one way to increase the security level of your tables would be to put them in a private namespace. So you will not be, what you'll lose is the direct REST API call to read data, whatever, and you'll end up with a lot more functions. Um, and it will look a little painful, but that pain will be well worth it. You will be able to now not you still need to secure the function in the sense things that need to be behind an auth need to still be behind an auth. But the one thing that I don't get from that is there is if your tables are in a private namespace, this table schema that I have, there's no way for me to get that because they're not available publicly on the REST API.
Would you recommend, like, is it okay to, when you're developing, I know we said that security is a foundation. It's not really a bolt-on. But is it possible okay to develop without it that way? And then once you get the tables and the structure and everything pretty much mapped out the way that you want, then do that piece? Or would you recommend doing it from the beginning with the functions?
I'll answer this in a different way. My wife asked me to clean this one thing in the garage 6 months ago. And I was like, I'm going to come back because there's something else that I want to quickly do. I'm going to come back and do it. It's 6 months. I still haven't done it. And that's exactly what's going to happen with tech debt. That's how tech debt piles up. I'm gonna make this one shortcut right now. I'm gonna come back to it tomorrow or next week. And then tomorrow it's like, okay, I got my first customer. Now they're asking for this. Let me just build this. And you'll build this without security. And then you'll add one more table and one more table and one more table. And then by the time you get to a point
Mhm.
like, okay, now actually I have enough traction where I can actually scale. You now have a system that is a huge tech plus security debt. Because if you started at the beginning, you would have started with one function to do all of those. And you would have figured out a way that, okay,
Mhm.
I just need to do one more function for another one more function for another one, and you would have built it like that. Now you've built 10 tables, all of them are directly accessible. And now you have to break your calling mechanism, build those functions, rethink all of this. Okay, how did I do that? What should I expose? What should I not expose? And the time that you spent in that redo is, if you ever get to doing it, is at least 3 to 4 times more than what it would have
Mhm.
cost you if you just started with the right approach. I will preface all of this with one thing. Uh, Superbase was specifically designed for database as a service, and the idea was that you would just get the database schema directly. What I am recommending, which is going with the edge thing, sort of breaks that whole paradigm of database as a service because you're not directly calling the database. And so there'll be there is a divide amongst devs in general on which is better. Superbase people, database as a service people, they believe that as long as you put your RLS properly and your auth properly, it is secure. And I will agree with it. As long as you put those policies correctly, it can be a really secure app. The part that I personally don't like is even though it's secure, it is giving me the exact blueprint of your data model, all the data that is there. And I know right now that, okay, well, there's no PII, there's nothing of interest, so I'm going to skip. Or there is something of enough interest, and now you have 50,000 users, and it makes sense for me to mine this data, so I'm going to try and figure out how to break it. because you've given me the blueprint of all the data that you actually store.
Awesome.
So Candace had a question as well, and Kanal, you probably help answer this, but her question was, is there a difference in Claude Code when run through Cursor versus Claude Code standalone? Right. And my answer is kind of, if you're leveraging Cursor as the LLM that's doing it, or the vibe coding tool that's doing it, then yes, there's a slight difference, but it's still leveraging Claude Code itself versus typing Claude when installed into the terminal and having communication directly with Claude Code and only using Cursor as an IDE, those are fundamentally different things for sure. You're adding a layer of obfuscation, or otherwise, you're adding another person in the middle of you two to talk to Claude Code when you're using Cursor. It's not a bad thing, but you just need to know why you would do that.
So in Cursor, when you choose Claude, you choose Claude as an LLM, which is Claude Sonnet 4.6 or Claude Opus 4.6 or whatever version. That is not Claude Code. That is Anthropic's Claude LLM that you're directly calling. Claude Code, Cursor does what Claude Code does, some of that, which is agentic coding. So Claude Code is the research agent that will decide how does it understand your code base and when to make a call to the LLM to generate code or get that understanding and make that back. I think what Cursor does is it'll make a call to Claude to get the reasoning back, but then it has its own agents that make the decisioning of what code to write, what not to write. So Claude LLMs in Cursor or Replit or any other thing is different, fundamentally different from Claude Code, the CLI program that Anthropic ships. That is a agentic coding CLI, which is similar to what Cursor IDE itself does.
Well, we got a long question here. Hold on.
I'm addressing it. It has the one from India around HIPAA. I'll address it in chat as well. But I mean, I guess I could say it here. So I mean, my answer would be that a BAA is definitely helpful in that case, Mindy. And our question, just for people that are only listening to this in the future and not seeing it, is she has a friend who was working with an orthodontist who did not believe they were intaking PII or patient health data. However, based on her research, they are, and she wants to kind of protect herself as a sub processor. For those paying attention, there is a quiz. As a sub processor of that data, she is responsible for some of that risk there. And she's asking, how can she better protect or guard herself from that, right? And so a BAA is useful in that, but I would strongly recommend in your case because it's kind of like saying, hey, I know, I've got to walk through this place that's going to do a lot of unlawful activity in order to get to the other side of it. Now, if you're caught in the midst of that unlawful activity, you could be found liable as well, right? So I would be very careful with that. And I would strongly suggest you to reach out to any type of data compliance lawyer. Really, you want to shore up things like your terms and conditions, privacy policies, BAA, all these things that are, the bridges between how you handle the data, your relationship with that processor, and then ultimately what your responsibility is, they can better define.
All right. We'll take Bev's question last and we'll wrap it up. So what if you code for a client and then hand the code over to the client, they start changing it? Are you still responsible for any hacking?
I mean, all of that depends on
It all depends.
the whole thing, right? It's like the contract that you were hired for, your scope of work. If I build someone a house, if I build them a house and it collapses on them, yeah, I'm probably liable for that, right? Because there's something there, there's code and regulations that ultimately I had to build that to. And in the same vein, if you built them and you knew that they were supposed to be compliant and you didn't do it, or they bought specific compliance from you and you didn't provide it, then yeah, there's definitely liability that will pass through there. So just again, privacy policies, terms and conditions, understanding your relationship with these people, your contracts when you're building these applications or tools for them is critical. It's absolutely. And this is why enterprise companies have full-blown legal teams involved in every deal that they do. It's because, I worked with more lawyers than I did engineers at the highest level because it comes down to that. Mindy, I wish I did. This is why I had Nikki join early on because Nikki Shelton, who was here earlier, is a fantastic person to kind of help you get to someone. She has an attorney background, fantastic individual. She's in the chat if you scroll up. I don't know if she's still in here or not, but she
She was
knows.
at
I used to
dinner.
work for a couple law firms, and I'll be honest with you, they're not my favorite people. Nikki is the exception to that, big time.
If you need to contact Mindy, let me know. I'll put you in contact with her afterwards. So, give me the code to be helpful. Bev, it's just,
Yeah,
I guess,
absolutely.
best practices. You hold your own code and then sign over saying now you're responsible if you make any changes. It's like anything else in life. Here, I give it to you functional. If you do something with it afterwards that deteriorates, it's not my problem. That's on
Yeah.
you.
I
So,
treat my projects like my taxes. I can go back 20 years, right? Like,
so that's it. We're gonna wrap up at this point over here. Would you also connect me with Ninki? Um, sure. Just DM me and I'll just drop you her email address. Or let me reach out to her first, and then I'll drop you the email address, get confirmation. But yeah, so I hope everyone enjoyed this session. It was knowledgeable. We're gonna have the replay sent out tomorrow if anyone wants to catch the replay. We're gonna probably do another webinar in 2 weeks on another topic. What I've been doing lately is those who've attended our AI Unleash intensive. I'm working through those who have subject matter expertise, and we have a lot of gems within our group. And every 2 weeks, we're bringing one of those folks who attended to talk about what they've learned or using their background as well. So, for those who don't know, we did an AI Unleashed intensive in January during the blizzard snowstorm, and then Cody made it all the way through after 3 flight cancellations. So, we hustled, made his way through. It was a fantastic opportunity. We're doing it again in September. If you would like to learn more about it, let me just drop the link. It's gonna be, and who knows how the world's gonna change by then. So I can't even put the AI Unleashed into. I can't even put the schedule up because I have no idea what's gonna be like in 6 months from now.
yeah.
Things are gonna be outdated by then, so I'm just gonna wait a little bit. In the end, what we're gonna do is it'll be the latest and greatest we're gonna cover. It's gonna be all hands-on learnings. We're gonna try to get Kunal there this year. We have to flip a coin, Kunal or Ruheen last time
You uninvited me to get Rohini there.
because you started hating on Lovable. Lovable was one of our sponsors. I had to kind of cut you out at that point. I'm like, I asked you the question, Kunal, if I invite you, are you gonna say bad things about Lovable? He's like, I can't,
I can't
can't
lie.
guarantee I won't. I'm like, all right, unfortunately, I'm gonna go with your wife.
He's the Abe Lincoln of vibe coding, right? Cannot tell a lie. Right?
There you go.
I may or I
So,
may.
so those who would like a hands-on experience, we're doing early bird special right now up to April 15th. So if you're interested, learn more, click on the link, learn through it. It was a fantastic experience for those who attended. And for the next time, it's gonna be the same thing. We're gonna be switching up the speakers. We'll be a lot more hands-on as well. And those who come out of there you'll have a lot of. There's a thing to say instead of watching YouTube videos. How many people start a YouTube video and never finish it? I do it every single day. Like 2 hour session, no problem. 10 minutes in, I get busy with life. When you're out in a different area, you're focused around other geeks who are trying to geek out with you. They push you hard and you learn at the same time. So if you're interested, check it out. Feel free to reach out to me. And yeah, and if the replay I'll be posting up tomorrow. Hopefully, I'll get you guys the email being sent out once I vibe code my email notification for replays. I'll be doing that later today, and then you will get the notification that way. It'll be on the same page, but now replay. Thank you very much, Sarah. It was fantastic. Kunal, awesome as usual. Cody, amazing. And when you signed up to the webinar, I added a little checkbox. Should you want to be notified of future webinars? If not, sign up. So that way, because my biggest issue all the times doing webinars is reaching out to people again, notifying them because Facebook doesn't show it all the time. I'm not going to send an email blast out for webinars, it becomes too noisy. So every 2 weeks, we're going to do something. So keep an eye out. If you're on the list, I'm going to send everyone an email, let you know, hey, there's a new webinar if you're interested. Come on, jump on if you're interested. All right,
Thank you so
everyone.
much for giving us this opportunity. It was great.
No
Thank you
problem.
very much.
Thank you, everyone.
This was
Take care.
fantastic.
Bye-bye.